we've got another episode for you this week. Please like, share, subscribe so you don't miss out on future episodes, and I hope that you enjoy this week's conversation. This episode will consist of topics around domestic abuse, domestic violence and sexual violence. If you require any support or help, please get in contact with your local domestic abuse, sexual violence organisation. In the UK, you can call the National Domestic Helpline on 0808 2000 247. And if you are listening overseas, please contact your national helpline where support, advice and guidance will be available for you. Hello everybody, and welcome back to this week's episode of A Conversation With. This week we're going to conclude our mini-series of power and control. If you haven't already listened to the previous episodes on power and control, I would advise that you go and listen to that, because it will give you the context of understanding power and control and why power and control is central of any domestic abuse and sexual violent relationship. So the first episode that we looked at the tactics that a perpetrator will use in order to maintain that power and control in keeping their victim within that abusive relationship. The episode that followed that was looking at power and control from a medical perspective. So basically a what not to do guide, a helpful versus unhelpful response to somebody that is disclosing domestic abuse. And we looked at some of those healthcare issues that somebody could present in a healthcare setting with that may not on the surface be correlated to domestic abuse, but actually could be a significant factor in domestic abuse and somebody presenting to you as seeking help and support. This week we're going to conclude, and I'm joined here with Sara, who is the named nurse for adult safeguarding for the hospital, and we're going to look at strangulation and suffocation within the context of domestic abuse and sexual violence. So what we're going to kind of really explore is what does that look like? What does that mean? It's only this year, July this year, that strangulation became a crime of its own accord. Like staggeringly, if somebody had strangulation as part of a crime that was committed against them, that would be commonly be seen as a common assault, ABH or GBH, which is shocking when actually there could be serious health implications from somebody that has been strangled. So Sara, hello, welcome. Thank you for joining us this week.
Hello. Yes, just expanding on what you were saying about the new law, which came out in June 2022. Perpetrators now face up to 5 years in prison, and there's new protections for rape victims now in 37 courts across England and Wales. Part of the government action is also to better protect women and girls. So for us as health professionals, the law is quite a landmark for us and for the country. And as a nurse from background and as a health professional here, we and as a team, as a safeguarding team, we are learning the relevance now in terms of non-fatal strangulation and suffocation with regards to domestic abuse situations. It's informing us for us to better make our inquiries with our patients, and in terms of and looking for signs that we perhaps wouldn't usually have spotted. So we're doing some I'm going to say doing some work, because it is ongoing, about spreading the word to our health colleagues, trying to show them the urgency and importance, and one of the shocking factors for me, particularly on a recent conference that was hosted, that Shireen and you and I attended, which was very, very interesting, was that there is a direct correlation with strangulation and suffocation to strokes in younger women.
Yeah, and like just to kind of cut in there, researchers, believe that strangulation is thought to be the second most common cause of stroke in women who are younger than 40 years of age. And like, again, researchers would say that there is an increased risk of not only stroke but brain injuries or as a result of somebody being strangled.
That's right. And the etiology, for those of you that are health professionals, is that what happens is that whether it is a prolonged period of obstruction to the airway or blood flow to the brain, or whether those are intermittent episodes within a short space of time or even over a longer period of time, can cause dissection of the carotid artery. And within that dissection, there is a huge risk of blood clot, obviously. And that's where the relation to stroke comes from.
I think it's important to note that, within the research, as part of the reason why this has now become a law, rightly so, is that 50% of women that were subjected to domestic abuse suffered strangulation, and up to 20% of those women had experienced some form of sexual assault whilst being strangled. So there would be some people, not you or I, that would say that, within sex, that strangulation could be a pleasurable experience. Or what's the medical term of that? Is there a medical term, where there's that kind of like overflow of, getting to the point of ecstasy?
Yeah. I don't know what the medical name is. I'm going to be very honest, if there is one. But yes, there are other instances where suffocation or strangulation could occur by other reasons, which obviously will have an implication with this new law. It's things like martial arts and stuff like that, where they put people in like head holds and stuff like that. That all of that is going to have to be looked at as to whether it's actually safe to do that. So it's raising awareness with, for lots of different reasons, that for our purpose it's domestic abuse, but there are other instances where it needs to be considered as well.
Yeah. And doctors like at North Wales Brain Injury and researchers at Bangor University have discovered that there's a direct link between cardiac arrest, stroke, miscarriage, incontinence, speech disorders, seizures, paralysis, and other forms of long-term brain injury as a result of strangulation. So from a domestic abuse perspective, we've always known that strangulation is a really high risk factor, which would indicate that there is serious risk of harm and or death. And actually part of the training that we went on to, which was like a really, mind-blowing statistic, is that if somebody has been strangled, the chance of her consequently being murdered increases 8-fold, which is staggering. So we've always, from a domestic abuse perspective, known that, but actually commonly, what's the link been between strangulation and health? Has this kind of is this just kind of on the surface and we're just starting to realise, or from a perspective of a healthcare professional, is this something that you would normally look at, from seeing that link?
I actually don't think it is very commonly thought about. If a younger lady or any person came in with a stroke, particularly a younger woman, whether that would whether suffocation or strangulation would be even considered. And I think on that line now, perhaps we could talk about what signs that we would look at in healthcare, because certainly there can be bruising behind the ear. Obvious signs would be like marks around the throat or chest, but there's also bruising that can occur behind the ears. Obviously, petechial rash, but damage to the lips, the teeth. The ears are quite significant as well.
And sometimes, correct me if I'm wrong, but sometimes there may actually not be any visual injuries of somebody that has been strangled. Sometimes a patient or a survivor, may not even be able to recall if they've been strangled because of the very quick nature of somebody that could lose consciousness, for example.
And that's the frightening part, is that I think it's about 15 seconds before someone can actually lose consciousness who has got their airway and blood flow occluded to their brain, and the timeline is really quite quick, between literally couple of minutes between the act of strangulation or suffocation and death occurring. So it's really frightening, and we know it's really high on the homicide timeline in terms of risk. So if somebody is being strangled or suffocated, again, whether it's intermittently over a course of time or whether it's a one-off episode, it doesn't matter. It's still a very, very high risk of homicide occurring at that point or next time.
Yeah, absolutely.
And as health professionals, we can do something about that.
And I think it's important to note that actually strangulation is a very gendered crime, and it's also a very intimate crime. Somebody has to be in front of you in very close proximity to have their hands put around somebody's neck and put in pressure or force around somebody's neck to restrict the airways. Research from San Diego in America, where they were looking at their forensic records where there had been strangulation. Out of 300 records where there was strangulation as a cause, 298 of those were male perpetrators strangling a female counterpart. So I think it's really important to note that in relation to strangulation, it is a very, very gendered crime. In relation to that, and it has massive psychological impacts on somebody. It must be completely frightening to have your airway restricted, or you lose consciousness, or you've lost control of your bowels, for example, and not having recall about that. And that's why we welcome the new amendments to the Domestic Abuse Bill Act, that strangulation is now it's now considered to be a crime on its own. And so if you feel that my advice is that if you have had any restriction of your airways, that you seek medical attention as soon as possible, just to get checked out, because we can't ignore the other signs and the really strong link that has on the physical body if somebody has been strangled. We do have a problem with pornography, where pornography becomes it's becoming more brutal, and young children are being subjected to visual images of quite brutal sexual activity, and strangulation as part of that. And I think that we need to have discussions around strangulation more, You know, I don't know what your thoughts are on you know, on that.
I mean, I think we're including suffocation and non-fatal suffocation and strangulation and the risks of that act in our safeguarding training. As you know, you are including that. But I can't emphasise enough, really, you know, the danger to victims if they have suffered it once or twice before, you know, to the risk to their life. And I've just found that the figures actually, so the victim can lose consciousness within 5 to 10 seconds of pressure being applied and blocking the carotid arteries in their neck. The brain is starved of oxygen from 11 to 17 seconds.
Wow.
The victim loses bladder control at 15 seconds and bowel control at 30 seconds.
Wow.
And the victim will stop breathing and dies within 1 to 2.5 minutes.
Which is, like, you know, crazy. Like, you know, that how quick somebody, you know, can lose, you know, the faculties of their, like, you know, their brain function, but actually can die as a result of somebody putting pressure around somebody else's neck.
So for us as health professionals, it's about us capturing potential victims. It is around the routine inquiry and possibly selective inquiry if there is a disclosure there, and actually asking about the nature of the abuse that they have been subjected to. There's no easy way of asking it, and as long as somebody feels that the person that they're with is kind, understandable, and most importantly, believes them.
And if you don't want to kind of just say outright, have you been strangled, you can kind of, you know, reframe that question and say, have you had any restrictions around your neck at any point? Have you had anything over your face? So it doesn't seem so harsh, you know, to ask such a direct question, but actually that you're still going to get the same answer by if somebody, you know, saying, have you had anything over your face that's restricted your breathing? Have you had anything around your neck, you know, that you're aware of, a scarf, a rope, anything like that?
And in the right environment, they may well offer up that information if you give them an open question where, can you tell me about the nature of the abuse that you've experienced?
Absolutely.
They may well offer it up there and then.
And finally, I think that it, like, you know, we just want to stress that strangulation, if anybody is disclosing any form of strangulation or suffocation, that's a red flag. It's a serious risk indicator of further harm and or death, and you really need to be speaking if you're within the healthcare setting, your safeguarding leads, be that from the children's or through your adults, or if you want to get advice from your local domestic abuse organisation, you know, they would be more than happy to advise on that, to be able to kind of make sure that you're offering all of the support that's necessary to that person that could be disclosing strangulation as part of the abuse that they have been subjected to. Thank you, Sarah. Thank you for joining us this week. You know, and I'll see you guys in a couple of weeks. And you've just listened to this week's episode. I hope that you've enjoyed the conversation this week. Feel free to like, share, subscribe so you don't miss out. And I'll see you next time.